Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. Go to audibletrial.com/Rushmore. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm your host. I'm joined, as always, by Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael, they like to debate, they like to discuss, they like to talk about things and rate the top four of those things. And this week is no different as we discuss the Mount Rushmore of Ensemble Comedies. This was my choice.
Jeff, why did you choose this?
Thank you for asking, Richard.
Right.
Nobody ever asked me any questions. I have, as a kid, I remember seeing the movie It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
Oh, that was almost one of my picks, by the way.
Was it really?
Yeah. Damn it, that would have been a point.
It stuck out so drastically from a lot of the other entertainment I'd seen because I remember it having everybody who was in comedy at that time. And at first I loved it because of the entertainment value of all these wonderful character comedians and even Spencer Tracy was actually kind of funny. But then realizing this was like an all-star team of comedians. And I want to hear what your picks are. So, the Mount Rushmore of Ensemble Comedies will begin with the person who has a C in their name, and can't spell comedy. With Richard has a C, Michael has a C, and Michael also has an M. And so, Michael, you go. Start.
Cool.
I had to choose. I thought about It's a Mad, 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 Mad World as well.
You're both pandering.
Wait.
Oh.
But I'd never seen it.
Okay.
I looked at like the cast list of it, and it was just like,
it's insane.
holy moly.
Yeah.
I also like that that movie was like almost 3 hours long.
Yeah.
And like I can't imagine watching that.
Yeah.
So just to start with, I had to have seen it. Like I couldn't have just been a movie that like I'd researched because for like comedic movies, like if I want to talk, I got to experience it. That would be a good. Hold on a second. That would be a good Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore of like movie experiences.
Oh yeah.
Like the movies that you have to see in theater.
Not just that it was a good movie, but it was like going to it was like an event.
Going to it
or
was
it was a thing that you had to do.
Yeah, jot that down.
Howard's End.
So instead of
Merchant Ivory.
Yeah.
I feel like.
So instead of a Mad, 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 Mad World, you chose $1 Million Mystery, the Glad Bag tie-in movie.
Was it really?
That's my joke. Do you remember that movie?
No.
It was like it was called the $1 Million
Off
Movie.
the rails right away.
And it was the whole thing was a promotional tie-in for Glad garbage bags, and they had to follow the clue. And the audience had to there was you could follow clues in the movie, and Glad was giving away $1 million somewhere in the United States. You guys never saw it? I mean, it had Tom Bosley in it, and Eddie Deason.
Oh, really? Okay.
And Rick Overton, and oh my God,
save it for Bozcast.
Oh man, Rich Hall was in it.
Oh, wow.
I think he might have had some Sniglets. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but I assume that's where you're going with this.
So what's your choice?
Read my mind. Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh yeah.
1984 comedy by Amy Heckerling, her first movie.
Yeah.
And written by Cameron Crowe, who had gone undercover.
Yeah.
To infiltrate what it was like to be a high school student. Mm-hmm. Did he not go to high school?
that is
like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Well, no, because he was like a Rolling Stone reporter and he was like 15 or 14, so I don't think he actually did.
He didn't have a regular high school.
He didn't have a regular high school experience.
I guess that makes total sense then.
Haven't you ever seen Almost Famous?
I have, but I didn't associate that he wouldn't have just also gone back to high school after he was on tour.
Oh, I don't know if he did or didn't, but I think that makes sense that he maybe
did. I think he also, but he wasn't that much older than a high school student, which is how it could even work. And he was a baby face kind of. You look at him now; it still looks like he's in high school.
Yeah.
So what I think is interesting about this is I was going to make a comment about It's a Mad, 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 Mad World was I think some of the celebrity-filled ensemble comedies were created because the movie studios were trying to compete with television and deliver a experience that one couldn't find on television. You could see a comedian, Danny Thomas, hosting a show, Father Knows Best, but you wouldn't see 100 comedians in a TV show.
Right.
So that was the 3-hour knock 'em dead experience.
Unless it was like the Night of 100 Stars.
Yeah, yeah.
Or Jerry Lewis Telethon, like you said,
but
something like that.
What was so cool about Fast Times is anybody who actually who knows this movie might think it was a star-studded movie, but at the time it was not. It became thus.
I mean, if Judge Reinhold isn't putting bums in seats, I don't know.
What is?
Yeah.
But it did feature, like, in retrospect or in hindsight, like a lot of like big names like Sean Penn and
like
Sean Penn,
Forrest Whitaker, Nicolas
Sean
Cage,
Penn was in it.
Eric Stoltz,
Jennifer Jason Lee, Anthony Edwards, Forrest Whitaker, Phoebe Cates' breasts.
Oh god, great performance.
This is just one of my favorite movies. I think all the movies on my list I've seen dozens and dozens of times.
I think of you as also a SoCal-ophile in those movies that do capture the essence.
They
of
feel
that
very
era.
much like being at home.
Yeah.
Even though it was like 10 years before my time of high school, like there's some things that just still feel.
Yeah.
Whether it's
Michael did surf to school every day.
That's right.
So,
whether it's like Sean Penn driving down, I assume it's Ventura Boulevard when he steals takes Forrest Whitaker's
car,
and his brother.
Yeah.
All of the performances are great. And what I like about ensemble comedic movies, or when I was thinking about what I was going to choose, I like the multiple storylines that you have to follow at the same time that eventually kind of come together, or they kind of cross paths throughout it. I think that's such an important element of it, because you're just not, it's not a single person storyline. You're kind of interweaving between so many disparate things that ultimately kind of come back together, and you're like, okay, this is tied up itself in a bow. It's not quite as like not About a Boy. What's the Love Actually, which kind of is not on my list, but that has that same sort of feel where everything is kind of like interweaving, and
I think
people are kind of related to each other, and they all know each other because it's high school.
Yeah.
I think you can have two. I mean, I think with the ensemble comedies, there's two approaches to it from a plot standpoint. One is like that Love Actually kind of Fast Times, couple on my list as well, where it's almost there are multiple fully developed plots that are happening.
Yeah.
And they're all basically related because all of the characters kind of know each other and interact with each other. Maybe they're related, like Love Actually, or one like a Cameron Crowe movie, Singles, that I seriously thought about putting on here, which they all live in the same kind of like apartment, complex, or whatever it is.
Either London or SoCal,
right?
Or that apartment building.
And then, like in Singles, there's an A storyline with. I mean, it's almost like TV plotting, right? It's like there's an A storyline with Keira Sedgwick and Campbell Scott. Then there's like the B plot line with Bridget Fonda and Matt Dillon, and the weird other like Jeremy Piven and Sheila Kelly. But these are very specific, separate plots that the other characters kind of pop into because they all know each other, but they're very specific, separate plots. Versus different types of movies like Fast Times, where they're maybe not like Fast Times. Different types of movies where the plots for these ensemble comedies have like one plot, and all these different characters are involved.
In The Hangover, they're all in the same plot.
Yeah.
I do like the behind the curtains aspect of this episode so far of our podcast. Just to take a quick step back, where you can see like a whole lot of like the broken pottery that we haven't quite put together. Like we both revealed like a lot of like all the stuff that like the half thoughts and like the things that we want to talk about but don't quite. I think because this category is so big and there's so many movies to choose from, like there's all of these. Well, here's my half finished ashtray here's this like glass that we like. It's very interesting just to listen to you, and it feels like I'm kind of talking to myself a little bit in that I can see the thought process of like, oh my God, I wanted to talk about this, but I
didn't choose it, so how do I not choose it?
But how do I talk? I just find that really interesting in like a behind the scenes
very
sort of
meta
like,
sort of way. Yeah.
Anyway, I love this movie, and I could watch it 100 times.
It's an incredible movie,
and it's got a great cast.
Richard, what's your first?
My first one, speaking of great casts, and a movie that I know I have watched at least 100 times, is This Is Spinal Tap.
Oh, that's a fun choice.
I felt like we couldn't do this without having a Christopher Guest related film in it. I know this is technically a quote unquote a Rob Reiner film, but I mean this is kind of the playbook for all the Christopher Guest films to come.
Yeah,
and 100% this is the movie I quote more than any other movie. The movie that I have quoted in my life more than any other movie, and the movie that I feel very confident that I've seen more than any other movie. My brother got me into this when he was a teenager and I was younger. there was our video store in town, RJ Video, and he would rent this. I swear to God, he would rent this like every week or 2 weeks, where you would think like, just buy the fucking thing already. Yeah. Although this was like 1985 or 6, so VHS probably cost like tape probably cost like $80 or 60, something like that. Who the hell knows how much it cost back then? But he rented every like 2 weeks and just watch it, and I'd watch it with him and learned all the lines. And I got to be like a teenager, and I'd start renting it. And literally, we broke the VHS. Yeah. You kids back there with VHS, you actually used to be able to watch it so much that it would just degrade in quality to the point where it was just non-watchable. We did that with this Spinal Tap. We collectively rented it. I had a friend who worked there when I was growing up as a teenager and showed me like the list of people who had checked it out over the years. And it is Manfredi, somebody else, Manfredi. Yeah. And like one day it just like stopped being something that they could watch, and they actually had to go and buy another copy, and they just gave us the crappy copy.
Did you know about its production nature of largely improvised, and did that matter to you?
Yeah, I think
it's just funny.
Well, probably when I first started watching it, like when I was like, my brother was 16, 17, and I'm like 9 or whatever I was, 9 or 10. No, I probably just thought it was a funny movie about insane, heavy metal musicians. Like I didn't know the improv nature necessarily, and I probably didn't get all of the inside jokes about that are specific to a lot of the actual things that happened in music. Like the girlfriend who's trying to do all the stuff based on cosmetology, which I think was like, I think that was like Iron Maiden's girl for someone in like
astrology.
Maybe it's cosmetology. What's the difference?
Cosmetology and makeup, I think.
Yeah, no, that's cosmetology. There's cosmotology and cosmetology.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thanks for education.
There you go. Maybe it was Black Sabbath. They had anyway. That's based on something. A lot of this stuff was based on stuff that actually happened to real life bands. I didn't know that at the time, but I knew that this was just an incredibly funny movie with these characters, and from an ensemble standpoint, you had the 3 main, Spinal Tap characters. Then you had Ian Faith, the Tony Hayes as the Dan Hayes is the guy who was on the Tortellis. This is Tony Hayes.
Tony Hendra.
Hendra, thank you.
Cosmetology. Tony Hendra. The former founder of Spy Magazine, right? Or he was like an editor there too, I think. He was a Lampoon guy.
Right? Yeah. So he's underrated in this. Oh yeah. I mean, he's great in this, and you've got beyond that. And then Rob Reiner adds also part of the ensemble. So part of me was like, God, is this really an ensemble piece? Because everyone kind of remembers either the Nigel Tufnell or the David St. Hubbins.
Oh yeah.
But there's so many other characters that kind of come in and just have these like little moments.
Well, it's kind
of that are fantastic. Paul Schaefer, Fran Drescher, Billy Crystal is the mime with the cannoli. Do the cannoli with Dana Carvey's the other mime.
It's almost in the same vein as like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where all these other people that were in it weren't necessarily as recognizable then as they are now.
Right.
Howard Hessman is like the tour manager of the very successful
Duke fame.
I love this movie. This is a great pick. And it leads into my next choice. But this is a movie that, like Star Wars, I've seen hundreds of times, and I'm constantly finding new things in it or things I didn't notice. And for a movie that's like 90 minutes long, and it surprises in.
There's stuff happening in the background, like I know.
In the almost the very first scene is when they're interviewing a bunch of people like that are like excited about seeing Spinal Tap. I love that there's just like this like drugged out like good looking girl kind of looking up, and she's very dreamy eyed, and this behind her is just like all these skeevy guys with these gross mustaches just like looking over her shoulder, and it just sets the scene of like, oh, they got every aspect of this life and this world perfect, from like the background casting. And like that's I think that's what is most impressive is like all the little bits and pieces that Fred Willard's super straightforward Air Force captain, all of it is just like, how did they do that? How did they get every part right? There's not one that you would recast with anyone else.
The guy from the Jeffersons as the hotel clerk, just as God made me, sir. And I think this, to me, this sort of sums up a lot of one of the things that makes a great ensemble comedy, because you run the risk with these movies of having so many characters that it's just chaos. And they can kind of just become cliches or sort of just stand-ins for whatever bit that you want to do. And like you said, these characters in this world. Like they've built this world where I absolutely believe that, as ridiculous as Nigel Tufnell is, I absolutely believe that there are guitarists who are just like that. And I believe everything with management and, them telling, that management would tell them, well, we got canceled in Boston, but don't worry because it's not a big college town. It's my favorite lines ever. And I think that's true. Like with Fast Times, I mean, they're able to develop those characters, even though you've got this broad range of characters that you have to develop in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your second, Michael?
Well, that leads into my second pick, which is the 2000 film Best in Show.
Yeah, I could have picked. I went back and forth on the two. Either one of them, you couldn't go wrong.
You see all of like the embers and all of the stuff and the improvised comedy that kind of started with This Is Spinal Tap and was basically perfected in This Is Spinal Tap.
Right.
And he took that and kind of took that to Waiting for Guffman, and then from that kind of started to develop his own, almost like his own SNL cast or like
his repertory company.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like the state, but like the guests, the guest actors or whatever.
The
guest
stars,
playhouse, the guest something.
The guest stars,
the guest house.
Gene Levy, Catherine O'Hara,
guest stars,
and
guest stars,
and Ensemble.
Anyone here is on guest stars? Hello.
Yeah, where are you?
I still don't know it.
Okay, forget.
Sorry, dude.
But Best in Show is, I think, his best work.
Yeah.
Pardon the wordplay. But
I observed that as well because I remember being disappointed by A Mighty Wind, thinking it wasn't as good as Best in Show.
It's not, even though if you go back and watch A Mighty Wind now, it's like...
It's very good.
It's surprisingly good. Yeah. And then for your consideration, it doesn't hold up. And just don't go watch...
Don't see Mascots.
Don't see Mascots.
Oh, it was a disappointment.
Oh, my God. But this movie, we talked about like kind of the... It's telling the same story, but it's almost like that... from 5 different points of view, or all these individual dog owner storylines, or these couples. Sometimes it's an individual that kind of interweave, but they're very specific. They're very separate until they kind of interact
until the very end, right? And even then, their interaction is somewhat limited.
Whether it's like the gay couple that have their Shih Tzu, or it's like the
Bloodhound owner.
Christopher Guest, good old boy from Alabama with
Anaconda nuts.
Bloodhound.
Anaconda nuts.
I say that in my head.
Christopher Guest is here.
I say that line in my head maybe every day. Pine nut, cashew nut, all white cashew nut.
One of the most memorable aspects of Best in Show for me is one of the DVD outtakes where they show him showing off his beach ball collection.
Yeah, and it's like completely filling like his like the cabin that he's got or whatever. It's just like bursting out.
I went to have it appraised, and the insurance guy, he didn't know what to say. Neither do we.
Yeah. I think that there is something very admirable about him casting all these people who he thinks and knows are very funny, trusting them to be to go off and do the improv of it, and kind of to round out their character. Like, I'm sure he kind of had sketches of who these people were, but then the actual characters themselves, I'm sure each of the actors brought so much to, what they ended up being.
Right.
Like whether it was the two, the couple that was basically the...
It was Parker Posey and
the lawyers.
Yeah, the Hamiltons who love shopping
this is
out
not
catalogs.
A busy bee. This is not a busy bee.
We're so angry. These two yuppies that are so angry and like Starbucks and just like
transferring that anger to their pet.
Like Parker Posey, she put on braces for the role. She wore she didn't need braces. She wore braces throughout the role because she felt it needed it, which is just
yeah. My understanding of how they do this is that Christopher Guest knows like the plot.
Yeah,
like he knows like, okay, this character's gonna do this, and we're gonna get to this. Basically, so he knows like point A to point B where we're gonna go, but he basically just tells the actors, "Here's where we want to go with the scene. Figure it out."
Yeah,
I mean, we haven't even talked about the dogs as part of the ensemble cast yet.
Or Fred Willard. Fred Willard, perhaps the greatest damned I don't know, ensemble.
You could have just ended it there. He's just the greatest damned.
He's just the greatest damned.
Maybe the greatest ensemble character actor of all time.
One thing, all of these choices that we've had, it seems like they're about a location or experience, and I do like some of them. The end, one of my favorite aspects is something where they do put on a show at the end, and it is a part of the plot line where all of these people are ultimately converging on a championship game or like a concert or something like that. And that is it seems like a lot of Robert Altman films have this kind of thing. It's almost like a Chaucer-esque thing where the narrative is going to take them all to the same location where they'll converge upon each other. And
I mean, it's definitely a performative aspect. I mean, he's making movies about people who want to be famous.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thrust of who all these characters are in their little pathetic ways.
I think there's interesting things
that's a great take
the
by both of you guys.
characters love their points of view and commit to them so deeply. The Michael Hitchcock and Parker Posey jerky lawyers are so dour and so sad and so pathetic, but they also have like something so real about them that Gene Levy can have two left feet. And you say, okay, I buy that. I get that.
And I love in these movies when people kind of fly in out of who aren't part of the repertory cast.
Yeah.
Like Larry Miller as Cookie's like one of her many ex-boyfriends, talking about gonna poke the kid's eye out with his thumb.
Yeah.
So Michael may not remember this, but when I had my heart attack and I was having my bypass surgery, Michael and Emily were nice enough to come and see me. I think the night before, in fact. And what we did for most of the time, not talk about my surgery.
We just tried to scare him.
Yeah.
We would pop out from behind the gurney and go, boo!
Air horn.
Yeah, they didn't even tell me they were there.
Quarters over.
No, we spent most of the time just sitting down watching Best in Show.
Oh, was it?
That's
yeah,
lovely.
Hilarious.
It was the actual like show part. So it was just us watching like the Fred Willard bits and just thinking it was the greatest thing ever. That made me feel pretty good.
Dog. Yeah. I like that all of this episode's just turning into like impressions of like your favorite bits from things. Like if you
how much could you bitch?
He had a pipe. He looked like a Sherlock Holmes dog.
Yeah.
That looks like a fast dog.
One aspect of improvisation that I think shows its purveyors at the height of the form is when they give each other love and support. And John Michael Higgins has what is one of the more flamboyant characters portrayals of a homosexual in film, but he does it with such loving sincerity, and nobody really gets one up on him. He's very clever, this character is, and those people who might be judging him within the plot line usually are worse for their interaction. But when Eugene Levy comes up and says, "You must be proud, Mary," instead of topping him, he loves it. He goes, "Who are you all of a sudden?" And just loves it.
Well, and that character, I mean, it could almost be a problem, that character, except he's like, he's not the butt of anyone's jokes.
No, yeah.
Like he's a flamboyant gay person, but then his partner is somebody who's definitely much more down to earth or whatever you want to say. Yeah. And the only person who really makes fun of him that whole movie is Michael McKean.
Yeah.
It's the way any relationship is, basically, where you can make fun of your partner, but other people don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my second pick, I'll just go and jump in because you mentioned Robert Altman, probably the king of ensemble films in general, comedy, drama, whatever. And so I felt like it was necessary to have one of his movies on there, so I went with MASH.
Ah, great choice.
And so it's interesting to see him in a working this ensemble type movie in a comedic standpoint. I love Altman. I love a lot of ensemble stuff like Nashville or Shortcuts, or I guess The Player kind of falls into this as well. But this one, even beyond those movies, maybe it's more like Shortcuts in this way, but there's no plot to MASH. Like you couldn't sit down so what's the plot of the story? What are the character motivations? What are they trying to get from this? What's their arc? There really isn't any of that. There's not like a thing that they're trying to accomplish. It is just this vignette of what these nurses and doctors and support people are going through in Korea, just trying to get through from one day to the next, doing this meatball surgery, trying to put people together and trying not to go completely insane in the process. So it feels like it's almost structured like a TV show in that way, where a lot of times TV shows you don't have, it's, you've got your 22 minutes and whatever happens within the space of that 22 minutes. And then you go on the next episode, something completely different. It may or may not tie in. If it's not episodic, it may not have anything to do with what happened the episode before.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it is interesting to me that this wound up becoming, I guess, the most successful. So one of the things I find interesting about this is because of that nature of it, it feels more like a TV show, like a non-episodic type TV show.
Yeah.
Where you've just got, in the movie, you've got these blackout scenes, right? Where it's like something happens, they go to Tokyo because the general needs to do surgery on them, and it's like 10-15 minutes of like wackiness ensues. Or the football game, which I think we may have mentioned on the show is one of my favorite just movie scenes of all time.
It was on our episode about sports something or
sports,
other. Fictional sports teams.
Fictional sports
Go back
teams.
and check out that episode.
That's a pretty good one, yeah. So it's got these like kind of bits, almost like skits or sketches that then dissolve and then just go on to something completely related.
Yeah.
Same world, but just not related necessarily to the last thing. And that feels like the way a lot of non-episodic TV shows are, like Cheers. You have a continual world of Cheers, but for the most part, one episode doesn't necessarily play into... You can have just episodes that are just standalone. You don't need to see anything else to know what's going on. And so it's curious to me that was the nature of the movie, and then MASH became, without a doubt, the most successful movie to TV translation of all time. And it is a true ensemble movie. Like you look at the TV show, and it really became, especially after the first couple of years, a real star turn. I mean, Alan Alda was clearly the star of it. Yeah. In the first few years, it was him and Wayne Rogers, but it was definitely Hawkeye and Trapper John were the stars of it, and then even more so after that, Hawkeye. But if you watch the movie, it's just like they're two of the doctors, and they're the two main doctors, Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland. And you follow them more than you follow anyone else, but there's all these other characters who kind of float in and have their own arcs, whether it's Spear Chucker Jones or the Aussie sort of anesthesiologist. They've got that scene where they're going to do the suicide in the funeral. But you've got all these like kind of characters that are floating in and out and around. You got the only other character only actor who came over was Gary Berghoff as Radar, and you've got scenes with him. It is sort of this like world that he's able to build just with a few bits and pieces of characters all over the place.
It's interesting as a movie that it doesn't seem to ever feel like it has a beginning or an end. You're just kind of there, and then you're just kind of out of there. You're kind of flown in and flown out, and that
it just drops you in. Yeah. It's like it is like you're just seeing this like slice of these characters' lives. It's just a random. We're going to drop you in at this point and drop you out at this point, and this is sort of the reality that they're living in. And I think that's part of.
One thing that MASH is about is not Vietnam, but it's about Vietnam. Korean War.
Yeah.
But America had just been watching the first televised war, Vietnam. And I feel like that's really what the context was.
Well, it was still happening. It was 1970.
Well, it's fresh. It's in people's minds as the thing they watch on TV every night.
Yeah, it was basically, we know we can't, it's probably too soon. Too real, yeah. To do this about medics in Vietnam. But if we do it based on this book about the Korean War, you don't have to stretch that far to see the parallels.
Yeah. Guys, we made it. We're halfway through, and we're going to beg you to download, rate, and review our podcast, but we want to suggest something before that. We want to suggest you using Audible. Why? Because they are offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out what they do at the Audible place. If you like ensemble comedies, and if you're a fan of British humor, then you'll probably like The Pythons autobiography by the Pythons, written by Bob McCabe, John Cleese, and Michael Palin, narrated by Bob McCabe, John Cleese, and Michael Palin. That is on Audible, and so are 180,000 other titles. Audible has it all. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Rushmore. Once more, get your pens, audibletrial.com/Rushmore, and you'll get a free audiobook. So, yes, we want to get in the dialogue with you about what topics you'd love to hear, what topics you've enjoyed. Download, rate, and review past episodes in iTunes. Then go to Facebook, go to Twitter, go to Instagram, and get in the conversation. We'd love to hear topics that you'd like us to discuss. And we is back, and we are discussing the Mount Rushmore of Ensemble Comedies. Michael, it's your third.
Mine is the 2001 Wes Anderson film, The Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh.
This is, kind of like with Christopher Guest and the guest stars.
Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you.
I get it now. I'm so sorry.
I'm so happy.
That's okay.
Now. I'm the happiest girl in the USA.
I ignored it as long as I possibly could, but then at some point you have to acknowledge when someone does.
Because I made a sign and was holding it in your face like a key card the whole time.
It said John 3:16, but I put it together that I knew what you're talking about.
From the episode of Famous Sports Fans. Listen to that one.
Kind of starting with the Royal Tenenbaums, he kind of started putting together his own little kind of repertory theater of people that make his interesting, quirky comedies. Mm-hmm. And this is replete with them, from Bill Murray in a minor role to Gene Hackman in the kind of title role. Mm-hmm. This is, I don't know if it's my favorite movie of his, but it feels like the most complete.
Oh,
like it feels like conceptually and consciously, and gives me the most feels. I guess my kind of theme or my thinking this week was, kind of like these multiple storylines that kind of cross together, and they kind of did that again with this movie, where you had kind of like the three children, like each of the three children or four children, including kind of the Owen Wilson character, kind of have their own story along with Royal, that kind of meet up at the end at like a wedding. So you have like the kind of neurotic Ben Stiller, Chaz character, and all of the stuff that he's going through with his dead wife and his children and everything, and then the bomber storyline and all of them, like they all are kind of fully developed in his kind of dark, kind of weird comedy chop way. Mm-hmm. To kind of lead up to something bigger, and it's about something it's about this man's life, which is his children's life, basically. Mm-hmm.
I guess one thing I love about Wes Anderson is he creates worlds and communities, and he puts them in this box, and the characters spend most of the story breaking out of the box. I felt like he just so controlled that. I feel like this was the first, Rushmore was a box. The home that the Tenenbaums live in was this box. Every other Wes Anderson film was about this community or this culture that they all create together, and then it oppresses them. They have to escape from it. For some reason, maybe I don't like Ben Stiller that much.
Could be.
I think that's it.
Or Gwyneth Paltrow.
I just didn't like him. I love the Wilson brothers a lot, and I loved Gene Hackman and stuff like that.
I can quote his Owen Wilson's friscalating dusk light, just the nonsense stuff that his character.
We all know that that Custer was killed in Battle of Little Bighorn. But my book presupposes, what if he didn't?
What if he did? Such a perfect line.
Yeah.
It's so funny how we've been talking a whole lot about improv, in some of our picks, and Wes Anderson is so anti-improv.
Yeah.
It's obviously what he wrote is what he expects to be seen on the screen, and he has all of his timing worked out, and he has his shots worked out, and he has all of the weird drawings and stuff, and like all his background stuff. It's all so meticulous. It's like he has these like little dollhouses of movies. They're just like so perfectly placed, but also perfectly executed. And I think that speaks a lot to the actors involved, in that he does choose people who, Bill Murray is a very funny guy and can be very improv based and can go all over the place, but he plays a much more subdued, role in this one. And like it's amazing that he gets so many people to kind of fall in line.
Except for Gene Hackman, who apparently was at the point of frightening Wes Anderson on a regular basis because how angry he acted through much of the shooting of this, to the point where Bill Murray had to basically follow him around on set.
Oh, I didn't know
and stand there with Wes Anderson to make sure that Gene Hackman didn't bother him.
Oh wow,
yeah.
Well, he did quit acting shortly thereafter.
Well, his last movie was that movie with Ray Romano. I think that would make anyone want to quit acting. Yeah. But no, I love this movie. I love Wes Anderson. You and I both share this. And I think this is the first movie that really got the mix of whimsy and melancholy. I mean, it's there in Rushmore, but it's, the melancholy is kind of like in the background.
It's supplanted by the teen angst.
Right. And I think this is the first one that really, I think, got that mix that he's had in most of the rest of his movies. Where, there's a lot of the funny bits that we can sit here and quote, but there's also, the relationship between Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow, and that, this kind of love that they'll never have in that way, I guess. You look at Richie's character in particular, he starts off as kind of this one note kind of joke, right? It's sort of like the gag about like 80s tennis players who've had, him having had a nervous breakdown, but like the look and everything, it's very like John McEnroe, Bjorn Borg or something. And that's kind of the at first he's kind of a one-note character based on that. But then they managed to develop him over time and turn him into this really kind of tragic character. I mean, he winds up trying to commit suicide because he is having a nervous breakdown, basically, and realizes he can never, this love that he has for his sister, adopted sister.
That's right.
Is just not going to happen, and it's not something they should be doing. So with Richie, I think that's a character, one of the first characters I think felt like a fully fleshed out kind of character with a heaping dose of melancholy that was more based on that than just sort of even in Rushmore, Bill Murray's character. Yeah, there's a lot of melancholy, but mostly it's in the service of some sort of gag.
Richard, what's your third?
My third one is Dazed and Confused.
Oh, fun.
Featuring our probably the closest we have to, I think, a modern day Altman in terms of the type of work he does and how he does it in Richard Linklater. And by the way, I should acknowledge off the top, I know we mentioned Wooderson in our Fictional Cool Guys episode. So I'm not really going to talk a lot about Wooderson as a character here, although he is an incredible character. So Richard Linklater, he does a lot of these kind of big ensemble pieces like Altman used to do. But he also has a lot of movies that are driven by just a couple of interactions with just a few characters, like the Before Sunrise movies. But then you do have a lot of these movies, like Dazed and Confused, which is sort of a snapshot of a lot of characters, kind of what's happening in them in one very, like you said, specific place and time. And I think they both of them also kind of have this. They want you to feel like you're actually like, it's almost cinema verite, right? Like you are part of their lives. They value realism versus sort of any sort of like cinematic tricks. And I think that's what works so well about Dazed and Confused. Like I don't think I was even born when this movie was supposed to be, set in. I'm, not from Texas. This is not a movie that I could relate to naturally in any way. But I absolutely feel like I know these characters. I feel like I absolutely understand who these kids were in like 1975 and in Texas in high school going to the big party out by the power transformer. It's such like he's able to make a movie that is like incredibly specific in the time and place, but also very universal. And I think that a lot of that owes to the fact that he's got these characters that are really well drawn out, that are relatable without necessarily quite falling into the category of tropes. And it is probably, other than Fast Times, it's probably the quintessential, here's a bunch of young actors before they made it famous type movie, right? Yeah. I mean, you've got McConaughey, you've got Ben Affleck, Adam Goldberg, Parker Posey is in it, who we mentioned before, Mia Jovovich, Renee Zellweger has like a small part in it.
Oh, she does, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I don't think this movie would have worked if there would have been a lot of like well-known young actors who would have been part of it. Like it would have just taken you like out of like believing these are just a bunch of kids, partying after the last day of school in some like small town in Texas somewhere.
It's so funny how like the movies that seem to be on all of our lists that seem to work are the ones that, as opposed to, no offense, Jeff, like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which is just chock-a-block full of like the biggest stars you could possibly get into every role. These movies that we've highlighted so far, they're a lot smaller in terms of who are the stars of it. I guess Royal Tenenbaums as the exception, where it's like, sure, I mean these people are, Angelica Houston is super well known, but like Richard said, like in Dazed and Confused, they're all like these smaller personalities at the time that later ballooned into much more recognizable faces. Yeah, and I think that's such a important aspect about casting like a big movie like this or a big cast like this is like you really have to find the person for the role rather than the name for the role. Yeah.
There was an interesting comment on the casting of Wedding Crashers, where they were trying to figure out who the they were trying to figure out who the patriarch of this family would be, and Christopher Walken is the patriarch of this family. So if he were somebody like somebody who had less stature, or somebody who was not maybe psycho, you wouldn't be as threatened or feel like scared for these guys. If they screw up, they're going to be caught by Christopher Walken.
Oh, interesting.
But I do find that interesting. A lot of these ensembles, you have to have somebody it could be a bunch of nobodies, but you have to have somebody who has a lot of gravitas to play, like a Gene Hackman.
I wonder if like they'd done The Godfather, but it was Groucho Marx.
Groucho.
That was sitting there instead.
I love old Groucho too. Like,
yeah.
I made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
I don't know. I don't know why that was the first thing.
Thing that I loved about Dazed and Confused is a great movie about youth and the backdrop of athletics. A lot of these people are the kid's going out. The kid is an athlete, and he's got to figure out, is he going to be with the Stoners or with the sports team? And then Linklater did Bad News Bears, and it was a miserable movie. It was like the movie almost hated itself. Okay, so Michael, what is your fourth?
My last is a very big, broad comedy, Anchorman from 2004.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which kind of diverges from, like, there's just a central plot in the movie, which is about, Will Ferrell's Ron Burgundy as, an anchorman not being able to deal with the changing times and, his new counterpart in Christina Applegate. But I thought this movie, one, is just incredibly funny from all sides. Everyone is so big, and everyone is playing it just for the biggest laughs and the dumbest jokes. And it's totally silly. But I love that they were able to bring in a bunch of like super well-known people to just do really dumb, silly parts. And sometimes, like a big comedy where you have a big star. At the time, Will Ferrell wasn't like the biggest of stars either. He was a, kind of burgeoning comedic force or whatever. Yeah. But, to bring in Tim Robbins to do a minor role, and Ben Stiller, who we've acknowledged that Jeff hates the hell out of.
When they have the Anchorman Rumble.
Yeah. And all these people just kind of fill in. And like, Fred Willard has a nice little part in this. And it's just kind of rounded out by like really fun personalities. Fred Armisen has a goofy role as like the nightclub owner, doing a very classic Fred Armisen voice of indeterminate origin.
Latin origin. The news anchor showdown is one of the great bits of casting, because everybody there had been in their own ensemble comedy or had pivoted with the other people in some kind of movie there before there. So that was pretty awesome.
And every time that kind of someone rolls in, like, oh wow, Vince Vaughn. Oh wow.
Yeah.
There's Luke Wilson.
They kind of did the SNL thing where they kept going with the joke in Anchorman 2, where they did basically it's the same movie.
Yeah.
But they did like the same thing where they kind of rolled in with like the more expanded cable news, different coverage, and like Kanye West is there playing a role, and I should not get points for mentioning the sequel to the movie that I'm talking about, but when the History Channel comes in,
hey, wait a second, this is my that's one of my type of movies.
I learned it from the best. But he rolls in with like Stonewall Jackson and like a Minotaur, and you're like, what did they just were like, let's keep going, let's take what we perfected in the first movie and just like let's ruin it, expand upon it.
What's funny is I hadn't seen that movie for like the first 2 years it was out. After it came out, like it just never fell into my wheelhouse.
Your queue of
like I didn't see it when it came out, and there's like one of those movies that so many people like told me I had to see it.
Yeah.
sometimes that happens and you just get like stubborn about it.
You develop a resentment towards this piece of culture that you're missing.
It can't be this good.
Yeah.
It's got to be. I'm sure it's not very good. For me, it's like there's something about Mary-itis. Because that happened with me. The difference being I really hated There's Something About Mary and turned it off about halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
But with Anchorman...
I've never seen it.
Really? You're doing fine.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're doing fine, kid. But Anchorman was something I was over at your old place with Scott after a kickball game. And we decided not to go to the bar. We just knocked back to your place to go drink whiskey and fuck off.
For the record, Richard is pointing at Michael.
You.
Good podcast behavior there.
Yeah, it is. Well, I said we went back to Michael's place. You weren't invited, Jeff, is what I'm trying to say.
For the record, I'm punching Richard.
Ow! and this got thrown on. I was like, oh well, I guess fuck it. I guess I'll see it. And I laughed so hard. This is one of the immediately like set about trying to get 3 or 4 other people who had never seen it to see it.
Yeah, insanely just quotable, and the performances are all just over the top, and it's you know, as opposed to all the other movies, it's just like it's nuts.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's far and away the best Will Ferrell movie of this type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't sleep on Talladega Nights too, but
yeah, you can sleep on it if you want.
I said don't sleep on it.
Okay, if you want to.
Though. All right, Richard, don't sleep on your last choice. What is it?
Okay, my last choice is, I know we're talking about Monty Python, and in terms of, I hemmed and hawed about putting Holy Grail on there. Monty Python and Holy Grail.
That movie falls apart at the end.
Yeah, well, it literally falls apart at the end. I decided that the Monty Python movies were a bit out of bounds just because they were a whole comedy ensemble before they made movies. So it's not, it's an ensemble film in that standpoint.
It's like Brain Candy.
It's like, Brain Candy, or to some extent Wet Hot American Summer, where you've got this built-in kind of group of people. Obviously, with Wet Hot American Summer, there were other actors kind of came in, and I'm shocked you didn't pick that, by the way. Sorry, Plary.
I honestly had the same sort of thought about it. I thought it was kind of weird to basically take The State and put it in a movie and say like, oh, that's an ensemble comedic movie. It's like, it's a long episode of The State. It's like an extended.
Yeah. Same thing with Holy Grail. I mean, I think maybe Life of Brian's a little bit less than that because it's more of a through plot, but I felt like we needed something from the Monty Python world, so I went with A Fish Called Wanda.
Emily and I just watched this like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago.
Seen it since it was
it's
in
delightful.
The theaters,
yeah, it's great. I mean, it's clear John Cleese enjoys working in this sort of ensemble world. You know, the stuff he's done after Monty Python, even when he's been a star or something he created, like Fawlty Towers, he's one of many characters in that. And a lot of the stuff he's done after that has been kind of more supporting type stuff. Like, he was on Cheers for a stretch as like Sam and Diane's like marriage therapist or relationship therapist. And he's done a lot of this sort of stuff since then that is sort of like ensemble. And I think it probably speaks to something that was comfortable with, even going back to his time in college and being in kind of college comedy groups and what have you. And this movie, it's just, you've got 3 great star turns. And I know Kevin Kline won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, but he's as much of a star of this movie as Jamie Lee Curtis or John Cleese. I just think he didn't have the name recognition of the other two, so that's why he was sort of looked at as a supporting character. But you've just got these 3 incredible like leads all kind of bouncing off of each other. And then you've got Michael Palin, who is in the supporting way, just basically steals the show as Stuttering Ken.
When he's trying to pronounce the Cathcart Hotel, and he's just like sing it.
And I think what's interesting,
I literally watched this the other night, so I know it's
fresh in
pitch
your
perfect.
head.
I love this movie.
I think we stumbled on something with all of these movies. Every single one of them, the exception maybe a MASH, but even I would argue that incredibly quotable. I think when you have an ensemble comedy, one of the things you wind up having is there's really 2 ways to kind of go with it. A lot of times they either fall into these very smart or talky kind of films where it's really driven off of the dialogue between characters. And then you've got the broad sort of ensemble comedies, and that have a lot of physical humor or a lot of like kind of goofy humor. Like I would put Anchorman into that category versus like Dazed and Confused I would put into the first category, being more the talky kind of dialogue-driven ones. And I think what's amazing for me about Fish Called Wanda is that it's both. Like, it checks off all those boxes. Like, you've got, these great, like, character dialogue moments, like between Kevin Kline and Jamie Lee Curtis when she's like pissed at him and running down all the stupid things that Otto believes, that the London Underground is not a political movement, blah, blah, blah. But then you've got this just dumb, broad physical comedy like John Cleese stripping while he's reciting Russian to Jamie Lee Curtis, and then the neighbors walk in. And then that does kind of fall back. I know we've even talked about this with Monty Python, how much they're this incredible kind of mix of super highbrow, smart humor versus just the dumbest lowbrow shit you could think of. And this is just, I think, another extension of that where it works on multiple levels as comedy.
Well, right on. That's great analysis.
Thanks, Jeff. You're so good at this, by the way.
Pilot.
You're such a good judge.
God bless you. You're just kissing my ass. Well, you know what, Richard, I have a feeling that you might win this one. I don't want to give away. I just gave it away already. But
I mean, you're the judge.
Yeah, you can do whatever the hell you want.
I got to reveal it. So these are the things that I thought while we're talking about this. I love the analysis of what different types of these comedies there are, where they take place, how they succeed, where they can have different tones and timbre. If you think of the Royal Tenenbaums as having a lot more, you said, successfully uniting melancholy and Méliès. I forget what they do. Sounds like ingredients on a BLT. But
no, it does. It does. Melancholy and mayonnaise. And I think Anchorman had a very broad execution. It almost had the Tex Avery Warner Brothers school of comedy in it, where somebody could get flattened with a frying pan in the next scene that they were okay, or a dog can get kicked off a bridge and he's okay after that. But so it was really fun to hear this analysis. Here's what I'm going for. I love the pull of This Is Spinal Tap. I loved getting a Fish Called Wanda in there because it was very different in Richard's analysis of the different types of comedy, and the fact that John Cleese had very successfully worked in ensemble comedies and then brought that to Fish Called Wanda. John Cleese is maybe the tallest, perhaps most dominant character in comedy who is so willing to share the fun with so many different people.
That's true.
In these different ways he performs. And I really like the pull of MASH, because that's something I would never have identified as a ensemble comedy. So there's 3 points for Richard. And because I just fucking love it, a big fat point for Michael on Best in Show, because that's just one of my favorite comedies. And I do agree with you. I feel like it's Christopher Guest at the peak of that formula and how it worked.
Best guest.
Can I get a quarter point for my heart attack?
No, you're already up 3-1. Get out of here. Can't milk that for anything else.
I will milk that for the rest of my life, or at least until I have another heart attack.
What I will, however, take away a point from each of you, because nobody said Cannonball Run. This has been the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff.
So wait, are we going to do some bloopers?
Yep.
At the end of this? I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.